Hey guys, welcome to FoundFlix. After over a year of waiting impatiently, Stranger Things Season 2 finally premiered last weekend, giving us an epic new adventure for all of our favorite residents of Hawkins, Indiana. Now, if you haven't caught Season 2 yet, there are going to be tons of spoilers going on here, so beware. This is your spoiler alert. Compared to last year's many cliffhangers, the conclusion of Season 2 is a lot more absolute and definite, though the threat of the Mind Flayer still does remain looming in the Upside Down in the end. While there isn't as much to speculate on regarding the ending specifically, there are many lingering mysteries left after Season 2, and lots of important new interesting mythological elements involving the Upside Down that are introduced, expanding our understanding of the dimension in new ways. So let's dig into the season, breaking down the big moments, how the season broadens the story's universe, and give some thoughts on the show's direction heading into Season 3. Which it thankfully has already been renewed for. And I can't possibly touch on every single aspect of the season in one video, so if there are moments or questions you still have afterwards, leave a comment, and I'll try to cover it in an upcoming video. Our story picks up almost exactly 1 year after Season 1's finale, where the Demogorgon monster was destroyed and Eleven disappeared. And since then, those involved have done their best to return to a kind of normalcy, hoping to move on after the events of the previous year. With the four friends Dustin, Lucas, Mike, and Will chilling at the arcade and going trick-or-treating, Hopper secretly keeping Eleven safe in his cabin, new kids Max and her dick stepbrother Billy moving to town, and Joyce is now dating Bob, the lovable nerd who is basically the season's MVP. Love Bob! But ultimately there's no returning to the town's simple life before the Upside Down, and Will, who spent the most time there lost last year, approximately a week, and also with that vine thing in his mouth, is increasingly plagued by visions of the Upside Down as the anniversary date of his being taken looms closer, and a new terror then soon emerges, known as the Shadow Monster. This new unconquerable entity becomes the main antagonist of the season, representing the evil of the Upside Down in its purest form, a dark, wispy creature that is driven to conquer all other races, viewing them as inferior, and will destroy the entire world as we know it in the process. And already the monster is beginning to spread its dimension into our own, with the source of this spread coming from the still open doorway at Hawkins Energy. And it's revealed at one point that in the years since we've seen it, the doorway is huge! Like ridiculously huge. They did try to control its spread via daily burns with a flamethrower at the doorway, as the vines and Upside Down itself don't like heat or light. But ultimately the growth is happening too quickly for them to contain. Dr. Owens later refers to the Upside Down as a virus, and that same behavior is what we are seeing occurring in town, with the Upside Down essentially infecting our world. New tunnels are being created underground throughout the town, with walls covered entirely in the Upside Down's living black vine tentacles, spreading into an intricate series of passages. And wherever the Upside Down has reached has an effect on the earth itself above, leading to a rot occurring at farmers' pumpkin patches and other crops in the area. The pumpkin scene now black and dead after the Upside Down has been there. It seems that if the Upside Down were to continue its spread to completion, our world would be completely robbed of life, and more closely resemble the appearance of its own empty dead dimension. So our team's got to get back together and stop this from happening, right? Well, yes, but not for a while. Everyone is kind of separated doing their own thing until eventually joining forces near the end of the season. Unlike in Season 1 where Will was mostly off screen, he is front and center at the conflict this time with the Shadow Monster and the Upside Down. As his visions continue to torment him, Will, following advice from Bob, decides to stand his ground, screaming at the monster to leave. But rather than retreating, the monster uses one of its limbs to create a kind of smoke tornado on the ground, circling around Will, and causing spirals of smoke to enter into him. Will already had a strong connection to the dimension after spending time there, but after this incident and all the shadowy darkness entering into him, Will is fundamentally changed, and he and the Shadow Monster are linked much more implicitly. They refer to the Upside Down as operating with a hive mind under the control of the Shadow Monster. This means that all the Upside Down's creatures, now including Will, are neurally linked to the monster. And if the Upside Down feels pain, as in being burned, Will feels it as well. demonstrated by the Hawkins employees torching a vine sample, causing Will to flail painfully, screaming of feeling burning pain over his entire body. Through this, Will in a lot of ways is the emotional center of the season, whereas the character who filled that in season 1, Mike, doesn't get quite as much to do this time, playing companion to the suffering Will and still being heartbroken over the missing 11. And every night he tries to contact her on his walkie, never receiving a response. Lucas and Dustin vie for the affection of new girl Max, who eventually joins the crew. But Dustin is sidetracked when he discovers a creature hiding in his dumpster, a land pollywog from the Upside Down. At first, this little tadpole seems harmless and cute enough, with Dustin happily feeding it 3 Musketeers bars, foolishly hiding it from his friends and treating it as a pet, naming it D'Artagnan, or Dart for short. But the tadpole form is only the first evolution of many for Dart, who sheds his skin, growing larger in size each time he molts. And when searching for it after it goes missing at school, Will realizes that it most likely evolved from the slug creature that he threw up, saying it made the same noise as the slug. Then things turn deadly when Dart grows even larger and busts out of his habitat, eating the poor family cat Mr. Mew Mew. And when turning his head, it opens its flower-like mouth, resembling that of the Demogorgon. Even though this is a different creature and started as a slug, it appears that all the various living creatures from the Upside Down bear the same basic genetic construction, all having the same body appearance and flower-like head, even if a different size or somewhat different species, as this one walks on all 4s rather than upright. All of this yields an unexpected yet awesome team-up, with Dustin enlisting Steve to help him track down Dart. And the conversation they have on the train tracks was amazing, and we finally learn the key to Steve's spectacular locks, Farrah Fawcett spray. The character arc of Steve on the show, from where he began as stereotypical jerk to now babysitting the kids, is probably the show's strongest. Steve is just straight up awesome at this point in my book. Nancy and Jonathan go in search of justice for Barb, her friend turned internet meme who was killed in the previous season. And after gathering a tape recording with evidence incriminating Hawkins' lab, they reach out to conspiracy theorist Murray Bauman, who has become obsessed with the mysterious events going on in Hawkins, like the sightings of a Russian girl with mind powers, really 11, and even more especially obsessed with the disappearance of Barb. Together they figure out a way to water down their taped information to appeal to the public and slightly change Hawkins' role in the death of Barb, blaming it on toxins released from the facility rather than anything otherworldly. And then they send out their tape and modified story to the press in hopes of taking the Hawkins lab down for good. In theory, this makes a lot of sense and would be a good thing, as based on Hawkins' behavior in season 1, they were certainly shady and evil. However, the new head of operations, Dr. Owens, is very honest and forthcoming with information about what is going on, and they really seem like regular old scientists trying to figure this thing out. And at one point, all the other scientists don't even care if Will gets killed, and Owens is the only one who refuses to accept that option. He seems like a genuinely nice guy. So the people running Hawkins now don't exactly feel warranting of being taken down in the same way as if Brenner was still running the show. But good for you guys anyway. I did really like that Murray instantly knew that Jonathan and Nancy had a thing for each other. That scene was actually pretty hilarious. And the two do finally reveal their feelings for each other here after spending all of last season playing will they or won't they. But even as a fan and wanting them to get together, this didn't feel like what I had imagined, since the only reason Steve and Nancy broke up is because she got drunk and went all crazy. All I was thinking here was poor Steve, but he's even better without Nancy in his new forced role as babysitter for the kids. Though the character with the biggest personal journey this season is most certainly 11. I understand why this was necessary from a story perspective, but it still sucked having her away from the others for most of the season. After killing the Demogorgon, she was able to return to our dimension via the same door the monster first used, and was forced to fend for herself in the woods, afraid to return to her friends out of worry for them getting hurt. But she is eventually discovered by Hopper, who takes her in, keeping her tightly locked up in a secret cabin where they begin to form a surrogate father-daughter relationship. Their dynamic here definitely being one of the highlights of the season. Despite them obviously caring for each other, Hopper does tend to fly off the handle on occasion, and 11 gets restless being trapped in the cabin, wanting to learn of her unknown past, and without telling Hopper, leaves the cabin in search of her mother, Terry Ives. The last we saw of Terry, she was essentially a vegetable after her own experience at Hawkins' lab years ago. But surprisingly, Surprisingly, she is more aware than it might appear. And she also boasts mind powers in some capacity of her own, able to blink the lights in her house to communicate with Eleven. So this raises the question, was it Terry that was gifted and passed it on to her daughter? Because Eleven is able to directly reach out to Terry mentally using the static on the TV to reach her in the void, the black space in between dimensions where Eleven first contacted the monster. And it's through the void that Terry presents flashbacks to Eleven, revealing another little girl that was at the Hawkins facility with Eleven as a child, Kali, aka Number 8. I'm sure we've all wondered about the possibility of other patients that were part of the same program as Eleven, and now with Kali we have our first glimpse, and most likely not last glimpse of this, as other patients will most likely start surfacing in the future. Eleven tracks Kali down to Chicago, and the two share an instant connection despite not knowing each other because of their history together, each feeling like they have found a long-lost sister. And interestingly, Kali's abilities are not the same as Eleven's. While Eleven has telekinetic powers, Kali's are more mentally based. Her powers allow her to manipulate someone's mind to show them something that isn't really there. We first see this in the opening of the season with her making it appear to the officer the tunnel had collapsed, as well as making spiders appear on the stupid Mohawk guy and her crew. These images aren't reality, but created only in her victim's head. Kali tries to recruit Eleven to help her in her cause of tracking down people in some way responsible for what happened to them at Hawkins, and gives her a super bitchin' makeover. Eleven isn't willing to go as far as Kali to kill those that hurt them, but Kali does help Eleven in a much more important way. She teaches her to channel her powers to a greater extent than seen before by focusing on her past anger, and using this allows Eleven to use her powers at a whole new level going forward. Back in Hawkins, Will uses his connection with the monster to provide the others with a potential clue for how to defeat it, indicating a specific point on the tunnel's map that he says the monster doesn't want them to know about, and Hawkins sends in a team to investigate. At the same time in the junkyard, Dustin, Steve, Lucas, and Max are attempting to lure Dart and discover more than they bargained for. More than one demo dog. We only ever had one monster in the first season, so it was definitely a surprise to see more pop up here. Just as it is for Steve, I'm sure, who maneuvers his way to safety, leading the dogs to attack the bus they are hiding in. But just as one is about to enter, it suddenly is drawn away along with the others. It seems something was calling them. As the Upside Down operates as a hive mind, the shadow monster is bringing them to a specific location, which we discover is the location Will had indicated on the map, a mass graveyard. The crew is killed, and we realize that this was all a trap set up by the shadow monster, using Will to send the team where it wanted. And the demo dog's next stop? The Hawkins facility. There's a ton of them at this point, definitely harkening back to the amped up action of Aliens, where the first film featured one monster and the sequel many more. There's also a healthy dose of Jurassic Park in this sequence, where the demo dogs descend upon the facility causing a blackout, forcing the computer system to need to be rebooted. And of course, only one man can save the day, Bob Newby's superhero. He is able to get the power back online to unlock the doors, but even with Owens helping out on the monitors to guide him, just as it looks like Bob made his escape, he is brutally torn to death by a swarm of demo dogs. It's a brutal yet perhaps expected end to this character, made much more tragic being witnessed by Joyce and the others. Now unable to trust Will due to his connection with the monster and the potential of him revealing their location, they heavily sedate him and move him to the storage shed where he was taken by the Demogorgon last year, covering the walls to obscure where they are. Even though it appears that the shadow monster has totally taken over Will, by appealing to fond memories from the past, Joyce, Mike, and the others tell stories about good times they had with Will, and they realize that deep within Will's body, Will is communicating with them in Morse code by tapping his finger on the chair, eventually spelling out the message, "Close gate." Close the gate? Well, that is a good idea. Surprised no one thought of that one before. How do we stop this thing? I don't know, maybe close the gate? The reality is this wasn't really an option for them to consider up until now, as the only person capable of doing that would be Eleven. Luckily, she shows up fresh from her personal journey, reuniting with Mike and the others, ready to do whatever she needs to help out her friends. But the problem is, Will is connected to the Upside Down. So if the door is closed, all creatures on our side will die, including Will. So before they can close the gate, they have to get the monster out of him. Remembering the Upside Down hates heat, heat, they bring Will to Hopper and Eleven's cabin in the woods, cranking up heaters on him to hopefully get the monster out of him. It does affect the monster, but Will as well, causing him to react violently as they turn the heaters up further, seeing black veins forming all over Will's body. And Joyce, desperate to not lose her son, cranks the heaters to the absolute maximum, finally exorcising the monster out of his body, which emerges from him resembling a smoky mass. This is the darkness of the Upside Down itself, which we saw injected into Will by the shadow monster back in episode 4. So this smoke is only a small part of the monster, which appears to be made up entirely of this cloudy mass. Now that Will is free of his possession, Eleven and Hopper are able to close the gate, heading back to Hawkins Energy, and on the way have a very heartfelt reconciliation that definitely brought a tear to my cold, cold blackened soul. But there's still the swarms of demo dogs roaming the building, and the bench team of Steve, Dustin, Lucas, and Max head to the tunnels, causing a big fire to lure the creatures away. This allows Eleven and Hopper to make their way safely through the building, where at one point they encounter an injured Dr. Owens. Now, I do like his character, and I'm glad he survived, but something felt fishy about this to me. So Bob gets torn to shred by these monsters, but Dr. Owens, only a little nip. He'll be fine. Throughout the season, Owens comes across as a genuinely good character, but I can't help but wonder how he survived with no gun and only minor injuries. So perhaps there is another secret side to his character that is yet to be revealed to explain how this was even possible. Eleven and Hopper descend into the rift, coming face to face with the massive doorway. She uses her powers beginning to seal the door, and this causes the shadow monster to call all the demo dogs back to them, where Hopper picks them off as they climb around all over the place. And the shadow monster itself appears, its head right on the other side of the doorway, staring at her as its darkness fights back against her. Then, remembering Kai's words to channel her anger to focus her powers, Eleven lifts her other hand, pushing herself further than ever before, and is able to close that pesky gate to the Upside Down once and for all in a CG-fueled showdown. In the epilogue of Season 2, things seem back to normal once again, with many highlights seen, including Eleven and Mike finally getting to go to the snowball, Barb getting her long overdue funeral, Hopper officially adopting Jane, and finally giving her a mother and father, all thanks to Owens, and Hawkins Energy being exposed due to Nancy and Jonathan's story and getting booted out of town. But our final shot twists back to the Upside Down, showing the shadow monster still looming. They may have closed the gate, but it is still there. So when it comes to Season 3 and the show going forward, which is envisioned as 4 seasons total, things are pretty much wide open. We already know Season 3 will feature another 1-year time jump to accommodate for the kids' ages, which means that they'll be heading into high school, which will no doubt cause all kinds of new drama for the boys. Also, please just leave Will alone. He's been through so much pain because of the Upside Down. Let some other people have to deal with that shit for a change. And hopefully the time jump will allow Jane to finally not have to hide anymore, and maybe even join the kids in high school. That would be a nice change up from what we've seen before, with her learning all kinds of new social behaviors thanks to the terrors of high school. Her getting to live her life like a normal person would be nice to see, even if it inevitably won't last. Certainly the shadow monster will return, and in interviews the producers have said that after Eleven closed the gate, the monster is now aware of her and her powers. Most likely it will try to find a way back into our world to destroy her and then everything else in our dimension. But how can it get back with the gate closed? Well, both Hopper and Dustin were sprayed from the spore plants in the tunnels, with Hopper getting the most of it. But Dustin even specifically says some got into his mouth. So they have inhaled these spores from the Upside Down, and this could potentially be enough exposure to be a problem in the future for the two of them. We don't know the effects of this spore plant, but since the Upside Down's intent is to spread its virus, it makes sense that they could end up responsible for new connections similar to Will's with the Upside Down. But to take things into a whole other direction that I think would be interesting, that ties into another dangling plot thread, that Brenner is still alive, and also the idea of other patients out there beyond 11 and 8. The employee who was attacked by Kali and 11 revealed that Brenner was alive, but they never try to track him down. He has to be alive and will come back into the story as an antagonist in some capacity next season. Since Hawkins' energy is shut down, Brenner could be on his own in the shadows, continuing the MK Ultra style mind control experiments he was doing previously, and kidnaps one of the other patients we haven't seen, using a deprivation chamber to connect to the void, and then of course back into the Upside Down. All it took for that doorway to be created was 11 touching the Demogorgon while in the void. And it seems easy enough for another patient with powers to be able to do the same thing. And this could lead to the shadow monster's return, where it takes over this patient and uses them in the real world to find Eleven. I think it would be cool for another of the patients to show up mysteriously in Hawkins, and it seems that they are friendly at first. But we discover that they are actually under the influence of the shadow monster, and later reveal how that happened through an experiment with Brenner. And of course, the shadow monster would target the other patients with the power to stop it, and it would be up to Eleven to bring together all the patients she can find to unite their powers in a final battle with the shadow monster. I don't know, what do you guys think? I'm just making stuff up at this point, but I could see them going in this kind of direction. That brings us to the conclusion of my breakdown and ending explain for Stranger Things 2. This video is by no means completely comprehensive, but should give you a good understanding of the major beats of the season and explaining where things end up. But there is a lot more to explore in the show, and I was thinking of doing a video focusing on the Upside Down's characteristics and creatures in more detail. Let me know if you guys want to see that. And make sure to leave any other lingering questions you have as well. What did you guys think of Stranger Things 2? Did it live up to the hype for you? And what do you hope to see in Season 3? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow for all the latest on Stranger Things and everything horror. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you in the Upside Down.